Hey everyone, this is Emma. Today is Wednesday, March 25th, and I'm going to do things a little bit different today. It's been a little while since I've recorded the last video because things have been different and harder, which I'm sure most of you understand right now. But like I said, things are going to be a little bit different for this video. I want to talk about a little bit more of a vague topic and not go into so much into the actual news of what's happening right now. So I'll just jump right in. In the midst of this terrible and confusing thing, I am continually encouraged and uplifted by the human response that is happening all around the world. Whether you call it flattening the curve, or following the rules, or simply being a good human who knows their place in the bigger picture, our individual and our collective efforts in the face of an unprecedented series of events is absolutely inspiring. It's true that there is fear and uncertainty everywhere we look. Some of that comes from the coronavirus itself, but a significant portion of what people are dealing with right now is directly related to the government, specifically the US government's inability to act, not only when it comes to the coronavirus, but also on a host of issues that are all being put under a really bright spotlight right now. There's also a completely understandable concern about the potential that this event will be just like another 9/11. To many, we have a lot more to fear than simply the coronavirus itself. We fear the way in which our government and other governments might respond right now and how that may lead to a new future for years to come. As I asked in a previous video, what happened to airports after 9/11? Have any of those changes, specifically with airports, gotten better or worse since 9/11? Obviously, they've gotten worse. We're at a turning point right now in which the US government may seek to strip even more of our rights and our civil liberties while ushering us into what may end up being a technocratic state. And all of that stuff is scary, for sure. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to end up that way. Our fears don't have to be realized. So back to what has been encouraging me. I'm going to show you numerous examples of what I'm finding incredibly encouraging at this time, and what shows me that we're at one of the most important tipping points in modern history. And generally, when at a tipping point, we can either go one of two ways. We can go left, we can go right, we can go forward, or we can go backward. And I think right now it's really up to all of us to make sure that we tip the right way at the right time. In previous videos, I talked about how a pandemic was at our doorstep. It was coming. It wasn't quite here yet, but now it's here. It's in our living rooms, it's in our bedrooms, it's in our brains, it's in our every waking thought. It's in our dreams. But now we have something new at our doorstep and something potentially a lot more positive. There's a paradigm shift approaching, hopefully, and it's at our doorstep now. This moment is uniquely primed to usher in a fundamental change in the way that society operates, not only on a national level, but also on a global scale. And as the people that recognize this unique opportunity and that it's here at our doorstep, among other things like helping our neighbors and keeping our communities healthy and educating others, we need to educate others on the next steps about what might be coming. Not only the scary bad things that I just mentioned that might be coming, but the way that we can spin this and benefit from it. We need to be building a safety net so that we can catch everybody that starts falling when everything falls apart, and we can funnel them into the change that humanity and the planet really need right now. The opportunity is huge and amazing. Unfortunately, it's taking this terrible and scary thing to get us there, but the fact that it's here, I think we really need to pay attention to that and be prepared for it. So what am I talking about exactly? The US government is completely failing us. If you're watching this video, you probably realize that. It couldn't be more obvious, even though some people still like to pretend that things are okay. Some of us have known for years that the government is failing us. Some of us were raised by parents that know the government has been failing us, and we've known it all along. Some of us have come up to that conclusion at different points in our lives, and some of us are just figuring that out right now because it's so glaringly obvious. We tested too late. we can hardly test people at all. Our hospitals are running out of personal protective equipment at alarming rates. Some hospitals are even threatening to punish nurses that bring their own PPE into work. Our healthcare system cannot handle this, and it likely will not survive. The unemployment rate is completely skyrocketing, and people are struggling to find the support that they need. Because our government, both local and national, are just struggling to help, and some are actually refusing to acknowledge that these problems exist, and so how are they going to fix them? So because all of these things are falling apart and people aren't getting the support that they need, people like you and me and our neighbors and our family are taking things into their own hands, and I find that absolutely beautiful. Yes, you can say that this shouldn't have to happen. We pay taxes, maybe we abide by the rules, and so we shouldn't have to do these things for ourselves. But in the heat of the moment, really, that stuff isn't what matters right now. The elite, the people on top, the lawmakers, whatever you want to call them, want to puff up the economy. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They haven't. And I'm sorry if you think that they do, but they really don't. But do you know who does care? Your brother cares, your neighbor cares, your sister cares, your friend cares, the person that you see once a week at the grocery store, the family down the street that you don't really know that well. They all care right now. Mutual aid networks are popping up all over the place. Masks for hospitals are being sewn by the thousands. Neighbors are shopping for neighbors. Med students are babysitting for frontline healthcare workers. People are offering up their housing for those who need space to quarantine. The list goes on and on and on and on. And all of this to me is absolutely stunning. So again, you may say that this shouldn't have to happen, that the government should have our back. In a perfect world, yeah, that would be great, but we don't live in a perfect world, obviously. So if you flip your perspective, maybe you can see that through all of these examples of people helping people, we don't need to be controlled or told what to do and when. We can use people power and we can use each other to accomplish what needs to be done to meet each other's needs. And we've also learned in this process that certain things that they told us were impossible were in fact possible all along because they're suddenly happening. So right now, I would like to show you an example of some of these things because the internet is just flooded with these examples right now. And it's, like I said, I find it absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And I think we all really need to pay attention to it right now if we aren't already. But think about how it fits into the bigger picture of everything that I just explained, of where humanity as a whole could be headed right now. So let me take you over here first. Right here is a Google Doc from the Relief Crafters of America. Now, this is a group that is not new. Obviously, in their name, you can kind of tell what they do. They are relief crafters. So when something goes wrong and some people need help and crafters can kind of come to the rescue in one way or another, this group bands together and they find out what they can do. So for a while now, they've been making masks for all of the hospitals, clinics, healthcare workers that don't have personal protective equipment. Of course, a sewn mask is probably not ideal, but when you have nothing, that is better than nothing. And some of them are sewing them with little pockets that they can put carbon filters into and put certain filters into to make them even better. So there's this really comprehensive document here. If you need to request masks, you can do that here. There's instructions on making the masks, patterns, templates, and since I looked here, they've added more information so that everybody has what they need. And then they have hubs set up across the country so that once you make your masks, you send them to the hub, and then the hub sends it to the hospitals or wherever needs them most. But the Relief Crafters of America are just one of many groups that are doing this exact same thing right now. Here is sewmasks.org. Basically the same kind of thing. They're just a group of people that are making masks and trying to find more people who have time now that they're home and have some skills in sewing. You can see their drop-off locations here on a map. And then you can add more drop-off locations if you need to. And that's not the only thing. So in addition to sewing masks, 3D printers are printing masks. You can see an example. They're making the headbands, the parts that go right up here, and they're 3D printing them. for Masks for Docs. Masks for Docs has one goal: to get masks into the hands of healthcare workers as quickly as possible. You can see some other examples here of some of the work that they're doing. Oh, look at this guy. What has he got in the back of his truck? It's James. He unloads plastic sheets and he's turning them into the face shields that attach to those 3D printed bands. It's amazing. So in addition to things like that are happening, there are mutual aid networks popping up all over the place. The link I have right here is for a Minnesota group because I'm in Minnesota, so I see these all the time. Disabled Elder Caregiver Mutual Aid. Do you need help? Can you offer help? Fill out this Google form and then everybody will connect the dots in the background to see what you need. There are Google Docs, there are Facebook groups and Facebook pages. Here is one for delivery in the Twin Cities metro area. Do you need food delivered? Join this group and figure out how to request some help. Media outlets are also picking up on what's going on and writing about it. Here's an article in Democracy Now! Solidarity, Not Charity, Mutual Aid and How to Organize in the Age of Coronavirus. This is happening all across the country, and it's absolutely beautiful. Like I said, you might say that this shouldn't have to happen, but the fact that it can happen really should teach us all an important lesson about all of us. Here's another example: delivery locations for produce. And look, they got so many responses that they've paused it for now. And in addition to the mutual aid in terms of shopping for people and tending to people's needs in that way. Here's an article in CNN that's, again, something Minnesota specific, but I have no doubt this is happening in other places too. Meet the medical students who launched a program to offer childcare to hospital workers fighting the coronavirus pandemic. Most of these med students are out of school because schools are no longer in session. They're med students, so they don't have jobs in hospitals and clinics yet, but what they can do is offer support to the frontline healthcare workers, and that's what they're doing. Now, here's something that is specific to New York, but is possibly happening in other places as well: essential healthcare workers housing. Some people in New York City have left the city because they're worried about what's happening there right now. So they've gone to rental properties or to stay with other people or to other properties that they might have had. So that means that there's a stock of housing as well as Airbnbs that don't have people renting them right now that are empty. So you can use this form to say, I have an empty property. If somebody needs to quarantine for whatever reason, or if they're a healthcare worker and they're afraid to go back to their family every day, here's an empty space that you can use. So you can fill out this form if you have that empty space, or if you're somebody who needs some space like that. Speaking of properties, rent is a huge issue for a lot of people right now because the unemployment rate continues to go up. People are losing their jobs all over the place, and how are you supposed to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars of rent if you don't have a job? Unfortunately, the majority of Americans just don't have enough savings for an emergency like this. So here's an example of a landlord who told a restaurant owner to pay their employees instead of paying the rent for their building. So it's not even renters for their homes that are having a hard time with this, but there's tons of businesses all over the place that also pay their rent too. Even some businesses that are really big and established and been in a location for a long time are actually renting that space. And if they've been required to close, how do they pay for their rent? Thankfully, some landlords like that one and other landlords who are landlords of apartments and homes are reaching out to their tenants and saying, you don't have to pay, or can we come up with some sort of payment plan? What kind of help do you need? Or like this example of somebody in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who decreased rent to just $100 during the crisis. But a lot of landlords are not doing this. They're not reaching out to their tenants, and some of them are actually sending letters, posting notes, and things like that saying that I don't care about the coronavirus issue, you still need to pay your rent. So there are large movements happening all over the country right now about having a rent strike. And in the midst of this, plenty of places have said that we are no longer going to evict people during the coronavirus pandemic. Evictions have been completely paused. And in addition to that, a lot of utility companies, sometimes it's been the government or it's been an actual utility company who has done it, to say, we are not going to shut off power, we are not going to shut off utilities during this time, even if you can't pay. So these things that have been a struggle for a lot of people for years and years, like I need some relief for rent. I cannot pay my bills, but they're going to get shut off. There are people that die in the summer because power gets shut off and they cannot keep their air conditioner on. It's been a struggle for a long time, and suddenly we're seeing that these things are actually possible. And in the same vein, here's an article on BBC News. Rough sleepers in London are given hotel rooms. Wow, that's really great news. The homeless population has been a huge concern during the pandemic. How are these people going to quarantine? How are they going to self-isolate? How are they going to keep themselves safe and protected and wash their hands however many times a day? How are they going to eat and find the help they need when there's nobody walking around outside? It's a massive problem in big cities all around the world. And look, all of a sudden, London, the government is able to provide hotel rooms for all of the rough sleepers. That's really, really good news, but this is something that people have been calling for a long time, and it's never happened, and suddenly it's possible. And look, Jimmy Dore said the same thing is happening in California. All of a sudden, we can find a solution to homelessness because it affects politicians' re-elections. True. So it turns out that the world's fifth largest economy can take care of its most vulnerable and desperate citizens. It just didn't want to before. And speaking of the homeless populations, despite people putting themselves at increased risk by going out into their communities, people aren't stopping the service that they're providing to homeless populations in their communities. And if anything, they're ramping it up. A friend of mine who lives in Las Vegas is very active in this way, and he posted the other day, "Our community is beautiful. Where government has failed us, the people come through. We have community members sewing masks from home to donate. The homegirl hooked up the whole team with official N95 masks. Folks have also donated ingredients so we can make our own hand sanitizer." Talk about amazing. It is amazing. And one big challenge that a lot of people are dealing with right now is that schools have been canceled. So families are home with their kids, and a lot of these families are working from home right now too. So, kids are home during the summer. That's something that a lot of people experience. It's not new to have to spend time with your kids at home, but suddenly being thrust into it in the middle of a school year, in addition to working from home, is a big challenge for a lot of people. But what's being lost in the conversation is the other side of it, what the teachers have been doing. Our schools were out because of a strike for the week before they closed because of the pandemic. So teachers had less time to prepare for this, but they put packages together in just a moment's notice for each of the kids. And the school has been providing lunch for families too. Once a week, you can pick up a box full of food for your kids to eat throughout the week. And here's a great post highlighting exactly what local educators have done. It says, "We gave educators almost no notice. We asked them to completely redesign what school looks like, and in about 24 hours, local administrators and teachers Apollo 13 the problem and fixed it. Kids learning, children being fed, needs being met in the midst of a global crisis. No state agency did this, no so-called national experts on curriculum. The local educators fixed it in hours. Hours. In fact, existing state and federal policies actually created multiple roadblocks." That's not unusual. Local schools figured out how to do it around those too. No complaining, no hand-wringing, just solutions and amazingly clever plans. And that is a similar story all across the country right now. And I am so happy to see social media post after social media post on all kinds of platforms recognizing what's going on right now. Just in on March 19th, Minnesota classifies grocery store employees as emergency workers, grants them free child care. Wow. And this person says, "The only lesson I'm learning is that the state has always had the means to help poor people, but will only do so when poor people's labor is required to keep wealthier people alive and comfortable." So society's real key workers have just been revealed. Not the bankers, not the traders, not the elite hedge fund managers. It's the nurses, the doctors, the delivery drivers, the carers, the porters, the teachers, the shelf stackers, the checkout staff. Some of you may have seen this mashup of a bunch of celebrities singing Imagine by John Lennon in a montage. that was making the rounds on March 19th. Some people liked it, but a lot of people reacted very poorly to it. Caitlin Johnstone says, "I doubt very much that any of these celebrities had any idea that this clip would receive so much disdain and revulsion from the public. Nothing in their day-to-day experience would have told them that this pivot against worshipful status quo elitism was coming." And it's here, and I'm so glad it's here, and I really, really, really hope that we don't lose it. So how bad does it need to get before a critical mass of Americans see that our elected officials are just fine with us suffering and dying as long as they get to keep their big houses, fancy dinners, and social privileges? Seriously, I'm asking, how bad does it need to get? You may have noticed that last week, some very important people unloaded their stocks, curiously, in mid-February, before the coronavirus rocked the markets. Here's a piece on it in Open Secrets that says, as the coronavirus outbreak began to spread across the U.S. in mid-February, Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr unloaded his holdings in dozens of stocks that would lose much of their market value over the coming weeks. And he was not the only one. Quite a few people sold all of their stocks before the government went public with what exactly was happening with coronavirus and decided to actually start acting on it. Elected officials that are tasked with representing us, helping us, protecting us, whatever it might be, need to have us as one of their priorities. And the fact that multiple elected officials did something like this, got rid of their stocks, tried to protect themselves before they even talked to the American public about the reality of what is happening is just absurd. It's sickening. It's something that we cannot forget that happened. This is very important to pay attention to and very important to remember. We cannot go back to normal after something like this. We cannot continue to rely on people like this that put their money and their stocks and their personal well-being ahead of all of us. Because of coronavirus, the intelligence community has reached its expiration date. We need doctors and nurses, not spies. We need hospitals, not spy satellites. We need cooperation and joint research, not a mass surveillance. Humanity must work together to survive as a species. And the status quo right now, the way that things are operating right now, is not us working together to survive as a species or do anything else. There are very different kinds of people at very different levels that are often working against each other or trying to profit off of each other. We must work together to survive as a species. It's a long time for us to get to that point. And here's another good one. Because of coronavirus, politicians may realize that money spent on war machinery is better spent on science. A military budget of $600+ billion is redundant in the nuclear missile age. The health of our planet and the improvement of our immune defenses should be the new priorities. And you'd think, in the midst of what we're experiencing right now, that these would be our priorities. You would think that things like sanctions that are harming the ability of a country to protect itself from coronavirus would be put on hold. You would think that no new sanctions would start. You would think that we would put a pause on the things that siphon all of our money out of this country and that directly harm and kill other people. But we're not. It's shocking that we're not. And people really need to recognize what is still happening right now while we were all dealing with this pandemic and this unprecedented event. Here's an article from March 20th. Despite the pandemic, lawmakers push for even more spending on fighter jets. If this doesn't make you angry, I don't know if there's much hope for what can make you angry. This is crazy. This is absurd. As the federal government develops strategies for how to deal with the coronavirus outbreak that has already significantly damaged the U.S. economy and killed over 100 Americans at the time, far more now, a group of lawmakers are urging Congress to approve the purchasing of 19 more F-35 fighters. Why? Important point here. According to Politico, the request for more F-35s came from both Democrats and Republicans. A document from Win Without War puts it very well. Years of funneling trillions of dollars into the Pentagon instead of investing in critical human needs have left us woefully unprepared to meet them. The war budget, the budget for the military, is massive. We cannot even comprehend how large it is. And right now, we're seeing the things that haven't been developed and haven't been funded, probably because most of our money is going towards the war machine. Our economy is fueled by the war machine. And we are now, right now, absolutely suffering for it. We cannot let that continue. We cannot go back to normal after this. Not only is the United States not acting well enough to take care of its own citizens dealing with the coronavirus right now, the United States continues to target countries like Iran and Venezuela with sanctions. Iran is suffering right now from the coronavirus and has been suffering under U.S. sanctions for a very long time. And sanctions generally directly impact a government's ability to provide medical care and health care for its citizens. People die as a result of sanctions because they cannot get what they need. Now throw in a global pandemic and it's just absolutely absurd and maddening that those sanctions would not stop. But not only are they not stopping, they're ramping them up. Here's an article from the Wall Street Journal from March 22nd. U.S. targets Venezuelan's Maduro regime with fresh charges, sanctions. Now, why are we spending any time even thinking about something like this right now, let alone doing something that is going to impact another country's ability to fight the virus? And we, as a global population of humans, are all in this together. If one country solves the problem and they rid themselves of the coronavirus, the only way they're going to survive without it is to completely seal off their borders and not let more people in. So if the United States somehow gets rid of the coronavirus and declares itself healed and doing fine, if Venezuelans have tons of the virus and Iranians have tons of the virus and they go to other countries and it continues to spread around, the only way that we'll be okay is to build a massive wall around ourselves, which is what a lot of us don't want. It's a very, very selfish choice. Here's a good point. What's the difference between a mechanical ventilator used to treat COVID-19 and a bomb? Answer: there's no shortage of bombs. But look at mechanical ventilator costs $15,000. I'm not sure if that's quite accurate, but the point is that they cost a lot less than a bomb. Here's a bomb that costs $227,146. We should have a lot of ventilators. We don't need bombs and drones right now. So, when all of this is said and done, who are you going to trust? Are you going to trust the government? Are you going to trust the public health system? Or are you going to trust the neighbor that made sure that you had food, the med student that watched your kids, the volunteer that sewed you a mask that literally saved your life? Who are you going to trust? We cannot go back to the way it was. We have to trust the people who are doing the work right now and showing us that they're the ones to trust. We are absolutely on the cusp of something huge right now, but to truly get to where we deserve to be from here, we need everyone to realize how the elite, a lot of the elected officials, the people on top, the CEOs, have completely failed us. But we have not failed each other. Humanity wins, and it is, like I've said many times, it is so important that we learn from that. We cannot go back to the way it was, regardless of what it looks like after this, regardless of if there's an ongoing police state, if martial law happens, if we devolve into a technocratic state, whatever. It doesn't matter what it ends up being exactly. It just can't go back to some semblance of government-enforced normal. We need to win after all of this, and we have the opportunity right now for people to truly see that. So I hope that you can help people understand that. I hope that you understand that and that you're ready to do whatever work we need to do to get from here to there, because the opportunity is here, and I really hope that we don't waste it. Thanks for watching. Please share this video. Hopefully I will get videos done a little bit quicker. Thanks.